Carol Maltese was a 26-year-old woman of Italian and Dutch descent, living in Rescoldina, a small town near Milan, Italy. She was a mother to a 6-year-old son who resided with his father in Verona. To support herself and maintain financial independence, Carol entered the adult entertainment industry under the stage name Charlotte Angie. Her career gained traction during the COVID-19 lockdown when she began creating content for OnlyFans. She reportedly earned up to 10,000 euros per month through her work on the platform. Carol was candid about her choices and the criticism she faced. As a mother working in a stigmatized industry, she often confronted societal judgment. In 2020, she participated in a video for the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. In it, she addressed the psychological violence experienced by women, particularly from other women. There's so much lack of respect among U.S. women. Other moms always judge you if you make different choices, like posting provocative photos. They make you feel like less of a mom, she stated. She had several recognizable tattoos that would later be crucial in identifying her remains. These included the words "step by step" on her ankle, "Wanderlust" on her collarbone, and "Be brave" on her elbow. These personal markings became significant during the murder investigation. Neighbors described Carol as cheerful but emotionally strained. While she maintained a pleasant outward demeanor, those close to her noticed an underlying tension. Balancing motherhood, her career, and personal challenges appeared to place her under visible stress. Carol's daily life reflected a complex reality. She navigated professional success in an often misunderstood field while managing the responsibilities of being a parent. Her life unfolded at the intersection of ambition, judgment, and resilience, all within the context of society, where women in her profession frequently face marginalization and scrutiny. Carol Maltese met Davide Fontana in 2020 during a photo shoot in Milan. Fontana was a 43-year-old bank employee and food blogger who lived next door to Carol in Rescoldina. Following their meeting, Fontana left his wife to pursue a relationship with Carol. Their bond became both romantic and professional, and during the pandemic lockdown, they collaborated on adult content for OnlyFans. The relationship between them did not last long. By late 2021, Carol had decided to end the relationship. She had expressed her intentions to move, either to Verona, to be closer to her son, or possibly to Prague. These plans signaled her desire to gain independence and shift her focus away from the personal and professional connection she had with Fontana. Fontana later admitted in his confession that Carol's decision to move away was what triggered his reaction. Investigators found that this moment marked a turning point. Although there were no reported confrontations or signs of immediate conflict, Fontana's later actions pointed to a deep inability to accept the end of their relationship. After the breakup, there were no indications that Carol maintained further collaboration or contact with Fontana. Her decision to move was communicated, and there is no documentation suggesting she anticipated any threat from him. From her perspective, the relationship had ended, and she was making plans for a new chapter in her life. Fontana's confession, however, revealed that he was unable to let go. The court later concluded that Carol's attempt to reclaim her independence and physically distance herself from him played a direct role in motivating the murder. The violent act that followed occurred just weeks after Carol expressed her plans to relocate. The relationship, while brief, was significant in the timeline of events. It represented a period of both personal and professional overlap between Carol and Fontana. The breakdown of that relationship, coupled with Carol's intent to move forward, ultimately preceded the fatal events that took place in early 2022. According to Davide Fontana's confession, the murder took place on either January 10th or 11th, 2022, inside Carol Maltese's apartment in Rescoldina. Fontana stated that they were in the process of filming a consensual erotic video. During the shoot, Carol was tied to a lap dance pole using duct tape. Fontana claimed that, as part of the scene, he placed a plastic bag over her head. He then began striking her with a hammer, initially in a non-lethal manner, before escalating the force of the blows. Fontana admitted to hitting Carol multiple times, eventually delivering 13 strikes to her head. He stated that at that point he believed she might already be dead, but out of uncertainty, he proceeded to slit her throat using a kitchen knife. This, he said, was meant to ensure she was no longer alive. His account painted the incident as an erotic game gone wrong, spiraling into loss of control. However, investigators rejected this explanation. They did not accept the narrative that the killing was accidental or the result of an erotic scenario turned deadly. Instead, the forensic evidence and Fontana's own inconsistencies led authorities to believe the act was intentional. The brutality of the blows, the use of a plastic bag for asphyxiation, and the final cut to her throat demonstrated clear and escalating violence. Judge Angela Corvey, presiding over the case in Brescia, ruled that this was not an impulsive act born out of sexual misadventure. In her ruling, she stated that Fontana murdered Carol out of jealousy and rage. He could not tolerate the idea of her leaving, especially after she had made it clear she intended to relocate to Verona or possibly Prague. The court determined that the murder was calculated and deliberate. Fontana's inability to accept the end of the relationship, coupled with Carol's plans for independence, became the motive. The crime scene, the method, and confession all indicated a premeditated act of violence. There was no evidence supporting Fontana's claim of a consensual scenario. The court ruled that Carol had been murdered in cold blood by someone who refused to let her go. Following the murder of Carol Maltese in early January 2022, Davide Fontana initiated a disturbing and calculated cover-up. He kept her body hidden in a freezer inside her apartment for nearly 2 months. During this period, he continued to access the residence and maintain the appearance of normalcy. As time passed, Fontana took further steps to conceal the crime. He dismembered Carol's body into 15 separate pieces, burned her face to prevent visual identification, and sealed the remains in multiple garbage bags. In March 2022, suspicions began to rise. Carol failed to attend a scheduled appearance at a lap dancing club, prompting concern from colleagues and acquaintances. As questions emerged, Fontana used Carol's mobile phone to send messages to people in her life. He impersonated her in text to her mother, her son's father, and various friends and fans. The messages were carefully crafted to appear casual, intended to reassure others that Carol was simply stepping away from public life. One message said, "Yes, the tattoos look like mine, but I'm okay." A direct attempt to explain away concerns after police discover remains bearing Carol's distinctive tattoos. In other communications, Fontana, posing as Carol, claimed she was quitting adult entertainment to change her life. He even paid her rent to keep the illusion of her continued presence intact. These deceptive acts served to delay discovery and mislead anyone searching for her. Fontana's manipulation extended to several weeks of maintaining digital contact with Carol's circle, presenting a version of reality that concealed the violence he had committed. His efforts were methodical, not impulsive, reflecting a calculated attempt to erase Carol's existence while deflecting suspicion from himself. By the time Carol's absence became deeply concerning, Fontana had already taken steps to dispose of her remains. He transported the bags to a remote area in Borno, a small town in the province of Brescia. There, the dismembered body parts were left in a ditch. The cover-up was not only brutal but strategic. Fontana's continued impersonation and logistical management of Carol's affairs extended the deception for months. His actions delayed investigation, confused loved ones, and deepened the tragedy of her loss. The cover-up would eventually unravel, but only after chilling effort. On March 21st, 2022, the investigation into Carol Maltese's disappearance took a decisive turn. In Borno, a mountain town in the province of Brescia, local police discovered several body parts abandoned in a roadside ditch. The remains had been dismembered and were severely damaged, including signs of facial burning. Despite the attempts to obscure identification, investigators noticed several tattoos on the body parts, among them Wanderlust, Step by Step, and Be Brave. These distinctive tattoos provided the first critical lead in identifying the victim. Shortly afterward, journalist Andrea Tortelli received a tip that the remains might belong to Carol Maltese. Tortelli decided to send a message to Carol's WhatsApp account. A response came from Carol, attempting to dismiss any concerns. Suspicious of the reply, Tortelli requested a voice message. When the responses suddenly stopped, he immediately informed authorities, stating his belief that only the person responsible for Carol's death would have continued using her phone. At the same time, law enforcement began analyzing traffic surveillance data. They discovered that Carol's car, a Fiat 500, had been captured by traffic cameras en route to the location where the remains were found. The driver was identified as Davide Fontana, Carol's former partner. This surveillance footage became a pivotal piece of evidence in the unfolding investigation. Police obtained a search warrant for Fontana's home. Inside, they uncovered DNA evidence directly linking him to Carol's death. The mounting evidence, including digital communications, vehicle tracking, and physical forensics, formed a comprehensive picture that could not be denied. Fontana was arrested on March 29, 2022. During questioning, he confessed to the killing and the subsequent cover-up. His admission confirmed the timeline already established by investigators and reinforced the conclusion that Carol had been murdered in January, her body hidden and later discarded. This phase of the case illustrated how modern investigative tools, digital footprints, CCTV footage, and persistent journalism played a critical role in solving the crime. The recovery of Carol's body, aided by her tattoos and careful public reporting, brought clarity to a case that had been shrouded in deception. The arrest marked the beginning of formal proceedings that would soon follow. In 2023, Davide Fontana stood trial at the court of Busto Arsizio for the murder of Carol Maltese. The prosecution sought life imprisonment, citing the brutality of the killing and the cover-up that followed. However, the presiding judges handed down a 30-year sentence, arguing that the crime lacked premeditation and cruelty. They portrayed Fontana as madly in love with Carol and claimed he felt used after their relationship ended. The court described Carol as uninhibited, a term that drew immediate criticism. The judgment caused widespread public outrage. Carol's family condemned the ruling, especially her aunt, who stated, "It's a shame my niece got life imprisonment for life." Italian media outlets questioned whether the court's language and portrayal of Carol's lifestyle had unfairly influenced the sentence. Commentators and legal experts raised concerns that victim blaming had affected the case's outcome. Compounding the controversy, Fontana was briefly admitted to a restorative justice program in 2023. The decision sparked criticism from advocacy groups and Carol's family, who viewed it as inappropriate given the severity of the crime. They argued that restorative justice should not apply in cases involving brutal gender-based violence and premeditated murder. In February 2024, the Milan Court of Appeals revisited the case. In a significant reversal, the court imposed a life sentence on Fontana. The appellate judges found clear evidence of premeditation, cruelty, and gender-based violence. They ruled that Carol had been killed because she was a woman, and that the murder stemmed from Fontana's inability to accept her independence. This ruling aligned with the conclusions reached earlier by Judge Angela Corvi during the investigative phase. Fontana was also ordered to pay €168,000 to Carol's mother and €180,000 to her son. The appellate court's decision was widely seen as a correction to the earlier trial's controversial handling of the case. The final ruling sparked renewed conversations in Italy about the intersection of misogyny, victim blaming, and the criminal justice system. Public and media discourse shifted toward acknowledging Carol as a victim of brutal gender violence, rather than judging her for her profession. The case became a focal point in broader discussions about how courts treat women victims. Carol Maltese's murder became more than a singular tragedy. It reflected a systemic issue plaguing Italy. Since 2003, over 2,800 women in the country have been murdered by current or former partners. Carol's death was not an isolated act of violence, but part of a larger pattern of gender-based killings. Her case gained national attention not just because of the brutality, but because of how it was handled publicly and legally. The initial trial portrayal of Carol as uninhibited raised serious concerns. The framing implied her lifestyle, rather than the killer's actions, contributed to her fate. That language echoed the judgment Carol herself had spoken about in 2020, when she released a video for the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. In it, she described the psychological violence she endured, particularly from other mothers, who saw her not as a parent but as a person to condemn. The societal tendency to scrutinize women who defy conventional roles was underscored by how the case unfolded. The early phase of the trial placed Carol under a microscope. while Fontana's manipulative behavior after crime nearly went unnoticed. By impersonating Carol through digital messages, he bought himself time. He kept up appearances by texting her family, paying her rent, and misleading fans and colleagues. That digital cover-up delayed suspicion and complicated the investigation. The 2024 appellate court ruling, which imposed a life sentence and recognized the murder as an act of brutal gender violence, was a step toward justice. Yet for Carol's loved ones, that justice was delayed and overshadowed by an earlier process that seemed more concerned with her choices than with the crime itself. Carol's case highlighted how the system can fail women, especially those who live outside traditional expectations. It brought into focus the urgent need to confront how victims are portrayed and how intimate partner violence continues to devastate lives. Her story, and the public response it provoked, forced Italy to reflect not only on one man's crime, but on a system still struggling to protect and respect its women.